The best salespeople are people who care about the well-being of their customers. They want to sell something that's worthwhile and meaningful. If you want to provide in value and service, then you're coming at it from a different place. And in my opinion, those are your typically good salespeople.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools. I'm joined today by Zerega from Cyborg, an AI startup in New York. He was my old boss at Stack Overflow when he ran the whole of sales and marketing. He was someone who I looked up to a lot, learned a lot from, and have wanted to have on the show for a very long time.
Double down on your success. As you hire salespeople, they'll find the market for you. Like, get some repeatable actions and then hire experienced salespeople. An experienced sales leader goes a long way.
Today I'm joined by Zerega, and Guy hired me when I worked very briefly at Stack Overflow, and Guy was the EVP of revenue at Stack Overflow, so the kind of the top dog of sales and marketing. And even though I was there for a very short time, I quickly learned that Guy really knew his stuff, and I learned so much from you, Guy. So really happy for you to come on today.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words. Appreciate it.
Yeah, one of the things that I remember from you, and I kind of always have it in the back of my head, first rule of sales is know your audience. And I remember you used to like kind of hammer this into us all the time. Why is it the first rule of sales?
So I first off, thank you for remembering that, right? And one of the things I try to do when I lead is develop things that are really easy to remember, right? Very simple rules of thumb. And the number one rule of sales, know your audience, is critical because our job is to communicate, right? And so the way that I speak to a 5-year-old is different from how I speak to a 25-year-old, to a 50-year-old, from a business person to a creative person, to a technical person, right? So what I need to understand is the person in front of me dictates how I communicate. The idea that I want to treat or communicate to people the way that I want to be treated and communicated to doesn't apply, because not all people are like me, right? So the real way to think about it is, how does Jack prefer to be spoken to? How does Paula or Sue or Johnny, right? You kind of say, well, who are they? Where do they come from? And as a fallback, yes, we treat people the way we want to be treated, but then as you get to know them, then you treat them the way they want to be treated. It is sort of in my opinion, the appropriate and best way to move forward.
Yeah, and I remember we used to do like a lot of kind of coaches, or like you'd listen to a lot of calls where we'd manage to book a call. I think we would record it and then we'd play it back in like these meetings. What do you see like the kind of common mistakes that people make?
There's a couple things, and one of the other ideas of what I try to anchor people to, which is the number one complaint about salespeople, is we don't listen. And so when we say we don't listen, what does that mean? That means that either you're talking and I'm not hearing what you're saying, or I haven't stopped talking and giving you a chance to speak, right?
Yeah.
But either way, I'm not listening. And that's a really important message for any salesperson to hear, because what happens is when you're not being heard, it depending on who you are, it can strike a deep emotional trigger, which can make you feel like you're not valued, that what you think or are saying is not important. And any salesperson that's creating that environment is never going to be successful. And in the same way that if I was a doctor dispensing, life-saving advice or medication, if the patient is not being heard, like, how can I do that effectively? Like, that's not a great experience for the patient. And so we think about the role of the salesperson. The best way to ensure that you are listening is to ask good questions, and allow the prospect client to describe and talk. And what I find is that when you do that, and open-ended questions are best, and when you do that, people will come forward and share what their challenges are. And then you can be of service and provide value and provide a solution. But if they never describe it because you're talking too much, what you're doing is you're making them feel defensive, and that's the worst possible equation to create.
because then they won't want to tell you anything.
Yeah, just shut down.
Yeah.
Clients shut down, become non-responsive, and that you're going nowhere with that.
Scaling DevTools is sponsored by WorkOS. If things start going well, some of your customers are going to start asking for enterprise features. Things like SSO, skim provisioning, role-based access control. These things are hard to build, and you could get stuck spending all your time doing that instead of actually making a great dev tool. That's why WorkOS exists. They help you with all of those enterprise features, and they're trusted by OpenAI, Vercel, and Perplexity. Here's what Kyle from Depot has to say about WorkOS.
We use WorkOS to effectively add all of the SSO and skim to Depot. So for us, we can effectively offer SSO and skim, and it's like 2 clicks of a button, and we don't ever have to think about it. It's like one of the best features that we can add to Depot, and it's super affordable, which effectively allows us to like break the SSO tax joke and essentially say like you can have SSO and skim as like an add-on onto your monthly plan. So it really allows smaller startups to essentially offer like that enterprise feature without a huge engineering investment behind it. Like it's literally, we can just use a tool behind the scenes and our life is exponentially easier.
Thanks again, WorkOS. Back to the episode. So I guess like a lot of my questions and my experience was because I was working as a SDR, sales development rep. So person booking meetings, and this was for Stack Overflow's Teams product. So for people that don't know, it's like an internal version of Stack Overflow. So it's actually selling to developers compared to a lot of Stack Overflow's other products, which at the time were like talent and advertising stuff. So I guess like the first question will be around like SDR stuff. And what did you see like the people that were like best at kind of booking meetings and progressing that onto the next stage doing?
Yeah, I mean, so to me, the folks that have the most success as an SDR, which by the way is the hardest job in sales, and it's always interesting that's where you start, right? Like that's where you start. And so if you can make it as an SDR, you'll be a very good salesperson. If you don't make it as an SDR, it doesn't mean you can't be a good salesperson. That's the other thing too that people don't know. But having said that, so let's just use the Stack Overflow Teams model for discussion purposes, which is you mentioned, hey, we were trying to engage developers. When you think about a developer, it's to again falling back on this idea of know your audience. So if you're selling to a developer, what do we know about developers? Developers code in a language. But if I said to somebody else outside of the technical norms, right, outside of technical communities, I mentioned language, they'd go, oh, Spanish, French. They would immediately go to a spoken word, right? But to a developer, language is a written word. And so what my interpretation of that is that developers, and it's also funny, like developers on Teams or in Slack will actually be saying, oh, I'm talking to so-and-so, but they're actually typing.
Yeah.
But I'm talking to Jack. No, you're not. You're actually texting. You're typing to Jack. You're not talking to Jack. And so what that really means is developers prefer the written word than the spoken word. So if you think you're going to call up and talk to a developer and get them interested in your product, you're probably not choosing the channel or the communication medium that's going to be appealing to them.
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing is, hey, they want to be connected to via email. Right? Send a good email. Then the other side of it is developers are trained to look for errors. Like they're trained to look for bugs in code. So guess what? You send an email that's grammatically incorrect, poorly written,
factually incorrect.
It's going to have no value, no weight. Like you're going to lose credibility instantly. And so what that means is you got to be really thoughtful and intelligent and approach it in a way that's going to be reasonable and appealing. So you don't have to be written, you want to keep the sales speak, the marketing stuff, to a minimum and just talk point blank. And the good news for Stack Overflow by the time you joined is that we had become a very strong brand within the developer community. So they're more likely to respond to something from Stack Overflow. But that's not always the case. And so how do you break through the noise? It's by being creative and thoughtful about what it is that they've done. and it's tough. But the more you know the person that you're trying to connect with, the better your chances are. And so, yeah, again, kind of anchoring back to the silly, which is Rio. So the first step is Rio, research and initial outreach. So research the person. Because of the internet, we now have the ability to get to know that person as much as possible. So do the research, then initial reach out. I mean, when I started, there was no internet. Like, you were cold calling, like, no idea who this person was. Sometimes you would have a name that you could not tell if it was going to be a male or female, and you were complete, just no idea. And you're always like, oh, I was expecting to speak to a woman, it's a man, or I'm expecting it to be a man, and it's a woman, and you can't see the person. It was just way more difficult and challenging. But people did actually, it's before caller ID, so people did pick up their phones, and that's a whole nother, layer of things.
Yeah. That makes sense. I think like in the short time that I had, the only successful one I think I had was like when it was like send this preposterously long researched email and got a reply, and it was like pretty spent. It's a very bad idea. I never, like, it seemed to work, but I never really realized if it was like a good idea to spend like an hour on an email or something.
The short answer is not a good idea, but the idea of customization is the right idea. And the other thing is
Yeah,
that the more that you do it, right, like anything, you get better and faster at it, and
yeah,
you start to understand the things that work. And when you put the time into an email, someone who's getting that email, if they give it 30 seconds, they'll recognize, hey, this person's put some time into it, and that increases your chances of a response dramatically.
yeah, yeah. So like kind of stepping out from like SDR. So say like you have a positive first meeting. I know this could mean many different things, but I'm going to let you run with that. But say the first meeting goes well. What do the best people do after their first like good meeting?
So there's an idea, and so many of these sort of quotes, or principles, or rules, or guidelines that I had adopted over the years always come from some other place, in my experiences. And I was a competitive athlete for a lot of years, and I had the good fortune of working with an Olympic coach, and he used to say that you have to earn the right to win. And so I translate that to, you have to earn the business. Right. And so what does that mean? That means that after a good call, you send a summary of what was discussed, and what we agreed as to next steps. Right. And that also opens up the sort of infamous ABCs of sales, right? Always be closing, which is a complete misnomer. There is truth to that, but it's actually always be getting commitment, or always be closing on next steps. It's not like closing the sale, because in today's business world, there's no such thing as a one call close, really. It's made up a bunch of different commitments along the way, to the big commitments when they sign, and you have a deal. And so, to me, that's what good salespeople do. They send a summary, agree on next steps, follow up, and they earn the business. And they become an advocate for um, the person that they're trying to serve, um, and deliver a solution to. For me, the best salespeople are people who care about the well-being of their customers. And that's, that they want to sell something that's worthwhile and meaningful,
Hmm.
right? Like, if you don't care about that, then what chances are, how good of a salesperson are you going to be? But if you want to provide and value and service, then you're coming at it from a different place. And in my opinion, those are typically good salespeople.
Mm. So that's more, in a way, more important than like the specifics of how you move it forward.
Well, it starts there, right? So it starts with motivation and intention, and then moving it forward becomes, hey, okay, so I'm going to demonstrate and earn the business by being diligent, being on top of the business, being
Mm.
responsive. And there's sort of a funny thing that, getting back to some of the stuff that we did at Stack, which is, one of the ideas here is that there's always an external goal, right? And then there's an internal goal, and the internal goal that I try to, I don't, I try to move people towards this idea, but it has to be something that everybody on the team agrees to, which is we want to be the best place to work at in sales, right? And so what does that mean? We want to treat each other well, be fair to each other, but simultaneously, we also want to be the best company to do business with, right? And so, okay, so how did that play out? That played out during how we treat the customer, and every single one of us has the ability to make someone feel good. And so if I recognize my job is to make your experience with me worthwhile, meaningful, uh, then guess what? Like you're gonna buy from me, right? And it comes down to trust. So when people make you feel good, you tend to trust them. When they're easy to talk to and provide valuable insight, you begin to trust that person. And so that's anchoring all, sort of surrounding this idea of the salesperson's job at the end of the day, get someone to make a decision. And so how are decisions made? And there's a sliding scale of emotion to intellect. But the emotion that has to be there is trust. No one's going to agree to buy a product from somebody they don't trust.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. So all these little things begin to build the trust. And some people are very untrusting, and other people are trusting out of the gates. And so your job as a salesperson is to assess where that person is on that spectrum and how they make the decisions, anchoring back to this idea of know your audience.
And that's kind of how you build the trust, is just kind of doing the things that you said you're going to do and that sort of thing.
100%. Yeah.
I want to go into that more, but also conscious of time, and I want to ask you from like the founder's perspective. So when you're talking to founders about, let's say it's a dev tool starting to get some sales, they've done it all themselves so far, but they want to take it to the next level. Maybe they want to hire someone, start building a team. Like what kind of things do you say to people?
So I think a couple things. One is, what you're describing is they've participated in founder-led sales so far.
Yeah.
And so, which is very typical for most startups, right? And what I would ask them is, what's the commonality amongst across the sales that you've had? Is there a pattern? Because really, at the end of the day, when you begin to scale, if there's no pattern, it's really hard to scale. So it's this idea of finding what's working and sticking with it versus trying to find, recreate success every time. And so really what you're starting to anchor towards is it the company that you're selling to, is it the thing that they're working on, or is it the vertical? Is it the size of the company? Like, what is it that is important, right? And so why am I referencing that? I'm referencing that because what you're going to try to do is build, so we talk about ICP, ideal client profile. There's also ICP, ideal candidate profile. So what does the ideal candidate look like for this job? And build that out. So someone that understands, let's just say, for example, you're building you have a tool that tends to, that you're selling to developers that tend to work in manufacturing. So you get somebody coming from, so if you can find somebody who has manufacturing in the background, in a sales environment, that's a plus. If it's a technical sale, another plus, right? So you start to itemize the things that you believe are critical to their success. The other thing that's also really important is when you're dealing with an early stage startup, is getting someone that's actually worked in an early stage startup before. So it's always funny to me. Oh, we hired an ex-Microsoft, ex-Google person. Oh, okay. Do you realize that salesperson had every possible tool and marketing collateral piece at their disposal. You put them in a startup environment, they're going to go crazy. Well, where's my sales collateral? Where's all the marketing? When's the next focus group? What are you
Yeah.
talking about? Like, that doesn't exist.
Marketing's not
So
doing their job. Where's all the leads? Yeah.
right. And so that's, that's to me, I've seen it over and over again where founders get enamored with people who work for big companies. Okay, that's great. If you're a big company, you're hiring that person, fantastic. But if you're a small company, look for someone that's been successful at a small company, right? Like, that's critical. And then the other thing too, which I know you and I've talked about previously, is that at the startup phase, depending on what your funding capabilities are, in an ideal world, you hire 3 salespeople, right? Versus 2. Some people, we'd be able to hire 2 salespeople. Well, the problem is you hire 2 salespeople, one's good, one's not. When you hire 3, now you actually have a fair comparison because you're gonna have, top, middle, and bottom. And if you hire 2 salespeople and both of them are terrible, is it both are terrible salespeople or is it the product? Right. And I've seen companies hire 2 salespeople. One person has no success. One person has success. And then every other person they hire after that person also struggles to be successful. And so what happened is they hired somebody who's, a ridiculously good salesperson and no one else can sell the product.
Yeah. That must be so good.
Yeah. And I know it's good, but that type of person. And so which is not the worst thing in the world either, because what ends up happening is if you can bring someone in who is really experienced and sophisticated, they can actually break down what it is that person's doing that's having the success, and then you recreate that. But it's a different level of sales understanding, and lots of times that person is having the success, they can't articulate it and translate it to somebody else. They're usually not at that. It's a different skill, and most times those people don't have it.
Like, kind of random question. Is it usually that like a very small number of salespeople make most of the revenue, or is it like tend to be?
So so usually it's the 20% equals, delivers 80% of the revenue, but there are other rules of thumb, and one of the rules of thumb in SaaS sales is, as you're scaling, 80% of your team should be hitting quota. And as soon as 80% of the team's not hitting quota, you gotta stop hiring. Something's wrong.
But could it be the quotas wrong?
Something's wrong. And so it could be the marketplace blew up, could be the product has lost its luster. It could be that we've saturated the market. So that it basically requires a pause in an analysis, right? You have to diagnose what's actually happening. But if 80% of the team's hitting their numbers, then you continue to hire. And the idea of, the 20-80 rule really does that's a fact. And that's just the reality of business and sales. How that plays out is different because you have, you have different, so at Stack, for example, Stack had 3 different lines of revenue. And within the talent team, which was the largest team, you had 3 different sales teams. You had an SMB, mid-market, and enterprise team. And so there lots of different layers. So a enterprise salesperson should be bringing much more revenue than an SMB person.
Yeah, but maybe slower to ramp up and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
This is a side question that I've heard some people talking about. What's like the minimum deal size or like annual contract value to like justify having salespeople versus like self-serve? Is that just like an impossible question?
No, it's not. Well, so I'm not going to give you an answer, but because the problem is that, so for example, I used to know these really well. I've worked in environments where the average deal is $9,000, but if you're closing 10 of them a month, right?
Yeah. Okay.
You're doing okay. And I've been in those environments. I've also been in an environment where the average deal size was like $5,500. but you were doing 20 of those a month.
So is it more about how much a salesperson should be bringing in?
Well, so a couple things. One is, so you're asking the question from a sales perspective, but you also have to ask the question from the market perspective, which is from a self-serve standpoint, how easy is it to use the product? Does it require a salesperson to explain it and then typically someone from the technical side to come behind that salesperson or work in tandem with the salesperson, whether it's implementation, account services, whatever it is. So to me, it's not just a purely a mathematical or financial question. It comes down to the product. At Stack, when I got there, we had self-serve, and we used to sell it in a single job listing, a 30-day job listing. And what we found out very fast was that nobody hired somebody in 30 days. It typically took longer. So when we were actually selling something, it wasn't going to be successful in most cases. And so then we started to say, hey, you got to buy, and I don't remember what it was, like, five job listings, or, so 5 months worth of job listings kind of thing, minimum. And then the next thing was, hey, we found that if we actually had a salesperson reach out, then this would actually double the amount of revenue that the client was willing to spend on self-serve.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was dramatic. And again, that's just by having educating the client in terms of what's required to be successful in that market. And so I wish it was a simple, guess what? Under $5,000 self-serve all day long. But if you could have a product that's $4,999, and it's the most difficult product to download and install, and then where are you? You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna have to have maybe paying people to support that.
Okay. So there is no easy answer, basically. People searching for an easy answer.
I think the bigger, the stronger takeaway is asking the right questions. Right. And to me, it always starts back to, what is the market? What is the product? What is the market? And, the buyers, particularly when you're new, the buyers dictate the terms. When you become a household brand and you have the best product, then all of a sudden you can change the expectations and behaviors in some cases.
Have you come across, because Vercel, I think a few years ago, and so I think there was a really good article by this guy Hank, who was, I think, the CMO at Vercel for a while, about how they started to hire people that were working at Apple in technical support and stuff as their salespeople to kind of reach out. Have you come across any kind of these unconventional ways of doing well, I guess it was just unconventional hires, where it was very indexed on technical skills, even though they're more doing the sales job, not just support?
I think in the case of Vercel, right? So Vercel, and they're an interesting company because what they've done better than most is really endear themselves to the developer community. And so that kind of speaks back to what we were talking about, know your audience. So they understood that, hey, in order for us to have success and get the momentum that we need to move into the enterprise, we have to have the support of the developer community. How do you get the support of the developer community? Don't put slick salespeople in front of the developer community. Put technical people in front of the community. Right. That would be my response or interpretation of what they did there. The other side of it gets back to what you had just asked about, which is self-serve, right? My understanding, and again, that I'm not technical at all, is that Vercel's products are so intuitive and easy to use that they are a pleasure at every turn, right?
Yeah, it is great product.
And so something that is like that is more, it's just gonna be way more successful on the self-serve front than something that isn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And so again, it gets back to product and market dependent. And oh, by the way, getting back to what we were talking about with developers, which is developers are much more comfortable at their keyboards, right? And then engaging in a dialogue. And so what that means is by having a product that doesn't require technical support, for me to reach out to anybody, to talk to anybody, I basically built the ideal customer, or the ideal product for a developer. Like,
Mm.
it's all in the
Yeah.
docs. It's all written
Yeah, yeah.
down. Like there's no way. It's foolproof.
Yeah. It's true. And I think there's a lot of companies starting to just try and go like full self-serve where they can. I feel like later on the buyers want to talk to salespeople.
So there's a couple things there. The first is, and I never had this experience until I got to Stack. So Joel Spolsky, the founder of Stack Overflow, very, very talented, intelligent, and creative guy. He was not a fan of salespeople, unsurprisingly, typical developer. And he was, he founded Fog Creek Software, and Fog Creek Software also didn't believe in sales. They basically believed the product would sell itself. And that was the belief that he brought to Stack Overflow. And then when he hired Tall Jeff Szczepanski, Tall Jeff had the exact opposite belief, which was, hey, you have to have sales. And what played out for Fog Creek was that they started to have their lunch eaten by Atlassian. And arguably, Fog Creek's products were actually better than Atlassian's. But Atlassian outsold them at every turn because they had a sales team. And so what ended up happening is they hired me, and I was the first sales leader that they hired. And so I was kind of like the ugly redheaded stepchild in the company because everyone else was developer centric.
Yeah.
And I'm not like a big, salesy sales guy. At least I don't think I am. And
Definitely not.
so I fit in well at that company because of my persona, and also because I came from a place of, commitment to talent, right? And so I aligned very well with Joel and Jeff, but he was shocked that all of a sudden the revenue started coming in, and we built this, at the height of the time that I was at Stack, the revenue was at 135 people, sizable. And that was something that was completely foreign to Joel. He kind of just stood back and watched it, build on itself. And so to me, sales, the conversation around AI taking away jobs. What I have found is kind of interesting more today than call it a year ago. The testimonial or referral of a colleague is more important
Yeah.
than what you're reading online.
Because you can't trust what you read online.
Right. And because of not just the trustworthiness, but the volume of it.
True. Yeah.
And there's just so much noise. And so what you really are now relying on is the word of mouth in a way. And so what a salesperson used to be the word of mouth. They used to be the expert, but now information's, at everyone's fingertips. When you start to talk to clients, they're way more educated about the product than they ever were before. And now it's information overload, and they're like, I'm drowning. Just tell me, who in my network has, had this same problem, and how did they solve it?
So they're kind of like become connectors almost, and like kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's the value of the network, right? It's the value of knowing and having strong relationships with folks you've worked with.
Yeah, I remember sometimes when it was like a huge company, sometimes you would know that there's this other person who's also trying to get this into the company, and they wouldn't know. And you'd be like, oh, did you know there's this other guy in like Amsterdam that's doing this thing? Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, so I guess last kind of question was the last question. Well, Guy, what do you think is the last question that I should ask you from like if you're a DevTools founder? I could come up with one, but I wonder if there's one that you think that people should be asking that they're not.
It's to me so it's sort of funny. Like we used to call it honeypotting, which is you have so you founder-led sales. You're having success. You got to be really diligent and record what it is that you're doing. Is it repeatable? right? And you try to replicate each of the, because every sales call is an experiment. At the end of the day, every sales call is an experiment. And if you approach it like a scientific experiment, what do you know? There are controls. What are the controls? What are the things that we can control? That's literally, to me, that's the best advice you can give to any, founder is double down on your success. And as you hire salespeople, they'll find the market for you. Like, just get some repeatable actions, some repeatable behaviors in terms of those controls, and then hire, experienced salespeople. An experienced sales leader goes a long way. Someone who's been there, done that, can do every facet of the sale.
Yeah, that's really good advice. And I guess as well, control for having 3 salespeople at a time, and
Right. Yeah, if you can, right? And a
control the
lot,
controls.
yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of companies can't do that. But the more that you record, the better off you are. And it's just, and if you really approach it scientifically and think of each sales call as a petri dish, you're going to really, it'll dramatically change the course of the company, in a positive way.
Guy, thank you so much. This is an episode I've wanted to do, I think, since I started the podcast, because I learned so much from you, and I hope that everyone listening did as well. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was always a pleasure, certainly working with you, and a pleasure keeping in touch. So all the best.
Thanks everyone for listening. And I think we're going to have the founder of Cyborg on at some point. So check that out as well.